Well, a little boy and his father were driving down a country road on a spring afternoon when a bumblebee flew in through the open car window, and the boy froze in terror. He was deathly allergic to bee stings. His father reached out, grabbed the bee in his hand, squeezed it, and then let it go. But the bee started buzzing again, and the boy panicked all over again. And so the father opened his hand, and he stuck in his palm was the stinger that he showed to the boy. And he said, "See this? You don't need to be afraid anymore. I took the sting for you." And that is the good news of Easter. The bee can still buzz. Trouble can still find us. The world can still feel like it's spinning out of control, but the sting, the final power of death, is gone. And the Apostle Paul puts it this way. He says, "Oh, death, where is your sting? Oh, grave, where is your victory?" Because of Easter morning, death does not get the last word. And we need that word very badly right now because the world is buzzing. Some days it feels like cruelty has a megaphone and kindness is whispering. Like lies travel fast and truth struggles to catch up. Like the powerful keep crushing the vulnerable and calling it necessary, ordained. Like the blasphemy that cruelty and torture and war are somehow sanctioned by God and by Jesus. And I don't know what worry you carried through these doors this morning, but I imagine if you're like me, you carried something. Most of us did. Underneath the Easter clothes and the music, there might be a quiet question. Is darkness actually winning? And that's the same question hanging over the disciples on that first Easter morning. John tells us in his gospel that it is still dark when Mary Magdalene walks toward the tomb. She watched hope die in public while the powerful stood by and they even jeered. The other disciples were hiding in fear, thinking they could be next. Everyone assumed the story was over. But Mary goes to the tomb anyway. Why? Because love shows up. Mary isn't expecting a miracle. She goes because she loved Jesus and wants to care for his body. And when she arrives, the stone is rolled away. She runs to tell the others. Peter and another disciple come. They look inside the tomb. Then they go home. But Mary stays because sometimes the bravest thing a person can do is simply stay. Stay when others leave. Stay when hope feels thin. Mary stands outside the tomb weeping. She turns and sees a man standing there, and she thinks he's the gardener. Well, maybe that wasn't such a strange mistake after all, because gardeners look at places that seem dead and imagine life growing there again. And that's exactly what God is doing on Easter morning. God is planting new life right in the middle of death. And the man asks her, "Why are you crying? And who are you looking for?" And then he says one word, "Mary." And in that moment, everything changes. She recognizes the voice. The one she thought was dead is standing right in front of her. Jesus is alive. Not a memory, not an idea, alive. And he knows her name. The powers of violence thought they had won. The cross looked like the end of the story. But God had one more move. The stone is rolled away. Death has lost its sting. Hope wins. And Easter means something else too. The resurrection of God's great yes. God's yes to everything Jesus lived and taught. God's yes to mercy over cruelty. God's yes to truth over lies. God's yes to peace over violence and war. God's yes to feeding the hungry and welcoming the stranger. God's yes to justice for the poor and dignity for every human life. On the cross, the world tried to silence that message. On Easter morning, God raised it up again, which means the ways of Jesus, the way of love, mercy, peace, justice, is not foolish. It is the way that leads to life. But the story doesn't stop there. Jesus gives Mary a job. He tells her to spread the good news. And this is stunning because in that time, women were not treated as witnesses in public life. Their voices did not count in the public squares, in the courts. But on Easter morning, Jesus chooses a woman to be the first witness to the resurrection. Mary Magdalene becomes what the church later called the apostle to the apostles. The very first preacher of the resurrection was a woman who loved Jesus enough to show up and stay. God didn't go first to the palace for the announcement. God didn't go first to the powerful. God went to the margins, to a grieving woman in a graveyard, and trusted her to carry the greatest news the world has ever heard. Mary runs back with the simplest sermon ever preached. I have seen the Lord. What fear has been buzzing around? Has there been fear buzzing around in your life lately? What makes you wonder whether darkness might actually win? Well, here's a question for you. What might change if you believed that the risen Christ is calling your name in the middle of that fear? Because that is what happens in the garden. Jesus doesn't give Mary a lecture. He simply says her name, Mary. And the risen Christ knows us, you and me, the same way. He knows your story. He knows your burden. He knows the things that keep you and me awake at night. And still, he calls you by name. Then he does the same thing with us that he did with Mary. He sends us because love makes people brave. Courage doesn't mean you're never afraid. Courage means love is stronger than fear. Some of you already know that kind of courage and feel sent as Jesus is sending you. Standing up when someone is treated unfairly, choosing kindness in a hard world, holding on when life has knocked you down. That kind of courage is holy. Because when Jesus walked out of that tomb, he showed the world something stronger than death. Not violence, not hatred. What did Jesus show the world? Love. The world may still buzz with fear sometimes, but the sting is gone. The stone has been rolled away, And like Mary Magdalene, we are sent into the world with the same simple message. I have seen the Lord. So if the world feels heavy, if you sometimes wonder whether goodness will make it, remember the Easter garden. Remember Mary standing there in the dark before the breaking of dawn. Remember the voice that spoke her name. The stone rolled away, death lost his sting, and love walked out of the grave. And if love can rise from a tomb, then love can rise in this world too. In you, in this church, in every act of courage that refuses to let hate win. Christ is risen, and that means hope is not foolish. It means love will win. Love wins. Amen. And now let us sing our final hymn and rise as we are able. Joy dawned on Easter Day, hymn number 241.